Hey everyone, it's Anthony Allen Ramos. All right, Quantum Leap, of course, was the beloved sci-fi series from the late 80s, early 90s, and guess what? Now it is in a total new reboot on NBC, airing Mondays at 10. The new season, Mason Alexander Park plays Ian Wright, the team's lead programmer who has built Ziggy, and I'm so excited to be chatting with them right now. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Okay, gotta ask, I've seen the first couple episodes. There's a lot of tech lingo. Is that something that comes natural for you, or did you have to do like a crash course and all that?
Yeah, about half of it is sort of out of reach, but I feel like I was a big geek, growing up, and I thought that I was going to do something more in the tech and science field for years. So this world is definitely one that I've been eyeing since I was younger and wanting to be a part of. I think I got to a point where I realized that I might not be smart enough to keep up with everybody else. It was math that screwed me up.
I agree. I cannot do any of that stuff, but you make it look very, very smooth. But I gotta say, it's super cool. I know for you, as someone who identifies as non-binary, Ian Wright is also non-binary. And I think, just to have a beloved reboot be inclusive in this way, but also I think for queer people in general, we don't have enough inclusion and representation in that sci-fi world that we tend to love so much. So how cool is it for you to be a part of this wave of more inclusion for us?
I feel really grateful. I've had a very interesting turn of events, with the last few years, going from doing my first sci-fi gig with Cowboy Bebop and then into Sandman, which was much more fantasy and heady, and now Quantum Leap, which is kind of back to sci-fi. I think it's cool because I grew up loving this genre in particular. I think part of the reason I became an actor was because I fell in love with Spielberg films and fell in love with the world building and the chaos that you can really get into when you're making a Star Wars or a Star Trek or a Sandman. And so I feel really grateful to be a part of this new generation of kind of queer characters that exist in the story but don't exist because they are trans or because they're non-binary. I think is unbelievably rare still to this day. It's really, I'm grateful that I get a lot of scripts now that don't necessarily have that information at the forefront, but even queer writers and queer directors are still making similar mistakes where they're like, okay, well, let's lead with the identity for X, Y, and Z, and here's a coming out story and blah, 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 blah. And I've become very bored of that sort of storytelling. So I'm grateful that, on a show like Quantum Leap, in the first, we're up to 4 episodes now, there's been one joke about gender identity, and it was an ad lib that I made about Ben's experience, his first experience leaping into a woman's body, and that was episode 4. And so we can make that kind of jab and people understand it, but it's not I've had this monologue in episode 2 that was this is why I'm non-binary and this is what went, and you're just kind of it's refreshing.
No, I actually did see that episode, so I must have seen more than I thought, because I was wondering, I was wait, because I thought about that's the first thing that popped into my head. I was wait a second. I was he's in a woman's body. I was I was a little nervous, but then I was your character came in, and I was okay, we're good. We're Ian's, it's no, and I think that is part of it, because I think with, a show like Quantum Leap that, people loved for so long and then are so excited that it's back, but also the fact that it's on network television. I think, for families, maybe people that, tune into it for the first time and see your character, they might be oh, well, I'm opening up their minds and hopefully being super accepting of a non-binary character.
Yeah, I think it's very groundbreaking in the way that it really does normalize a lot of things that I think have often been considered fringe, and I think that non-binary characters still kind of exist in a strange supporting capacity, and they're often very limited in what they do and what they represent. And so with the last few shows, I felt very, very lucky that they've all sort of continued this tradition of being like, well, this person is just kind of a person, and let's like really dig into what that character is. And like we didn't have to really have conversations about identity when it came to Ian, beyond like moving into some of the future episodes, things that might relate to Ian's experience as a trans individual or as a non-binary person. Those kinds of conversations have been taking place because we are doing a lot of really groundbreaking and beautiful stuff in the writers' room that is hopefully going to continue to open up doors for conversations with people who may or may not be aware of how many non-binary or trans individuals they meet in the real world, because we're everywhere. I think that like people have just become so insular and unaware of the fact that like you're the cashier at this place, or your waiter here, or like your friend next door, like we're surrounded by queer individuals all the time. But the fear mongering that kind of makes this divide and puts up all the walls, I think it's nice to hopefully start breaking that down in the network world. We get to come to people's homes all the time. We're invited to be a part of people's like routines, which is an honor, and it's very different than doing a streaming show or something that's like binged in a nice little chunk. So I'm excited to see what the ripple effects of this kind of inclusion will have, not only in the real, but also in the entertainment street.
Yeah, I mean, and also like good news, the show's been picked up for more episodes, so more opportunity for us to get to know Ian. How would you describe, I mean, I know I won't get the spoilers, but like, what are we gonna see? I mean, I want to learn more about Ian. I feel like I know a little bit, but Ian is very smart, very stylish, I have to say that also too, which I'm sure you had something to do with, but what are we gonna see?
We're gonna get to really, oh God, it's hard to talk about this because the spoilers are wild. All of the characters are really being fleshed out in a way that both supports the story, but also kind of gives them a point of view. And a big thing that the writers' room and Dean and Martin, who are kind of, continuing to push all of the storytelling forward, we're really focused on making Ian a really important player in Ben's journey in particular. And I think up until now, I've sort of been in support of the main story, in support of Addison, and kind of like Ian is a really weirdly like a great friend. Even like all the quips and humor aside, like I feel like the heart of that character and the way that the show has built a lot of scenes around that has been really refreshing. But yeah, moving forward, there's going to be a lot of really interesting stuff that happens. I wish that I could talk about clearly without giving anything away. But yeah, they're in the midst of writing some really amazing stuff that are like the twists and turns are awesome.
That's incredible. And look, I mean, it's going to be on for a long, like more episodes coming. It's where I am here for it. I mean, you mentioned Sandman, and I'm going to be straight up with you. I'm the only queer person that hasn't seen it yet. And I know it's the best thing of all time. Everyone and all my friends are telling me, but I mean, you're on a roll. Like, I mean, that must have been a super amazing experience, because I mean, people like we were talking about binging are eating it up, loving every second. It looks so delicious.
It's a remarkable show. I think it to this date, and I hope this will remain true for a little bit, and maybe, but actually not for too long. I think it's one of the most important queer shows that's ever been made. It is one of the few shows that was not advertised as a queer thing, but got review bombed by, like a very specific group of individuals that, maybe do not like queer people, because of how like sneakily magically queer it is. I think there's like maybe one or two straight couples in the entire series, and it's like insane to think that something that is so important, was such a groundbreaking comic book, groundbreaking graphic novel, has had this long life and is revered as one of the greatest literary works, in that genre, is heavily populated with people that like do not come out, do not have any, like have existed since the beginning of time and are all on every page of that comic. And it's because Neil Gaiman, you know, like grew up around that world. He grew up around people of color, and all of his friends were multicultural and came from different backgrounds and experiences. So that's embedded into the world building that we did. And I've never seen more people of color and more queer people of color in a leading capacity in a show like this before. So I'm like honored to get to be one of those individuals and get to just exist in that way.
No, I love it. I mean, your track record for very great, but also like groundbreaking series and projects is good so far. I mean, Quantum Leap, Sandman, Cowboy Bebop. I mean, I know you've done a lot of other stuff too, music, on stage. I mean, you can do it all. But Mason, it's so nice to meet you. I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited for Quantum Leap. So everyone, make sure you tune in Monday nights at 10 o'clock on NBC. It is called Quantum Leap. It features Mason, who plays Ian Wright. It is a lot of fun. It's gonna get you hooked. But yeah, like I said, I can't wait to see what happens with Ian. But hopefully I'll see you in person soon, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much.